Alright, in this video we're going to be going over all of AP Macro Unit 1. All vocab words that you should know for the test are highlighted in blue, while big points are highlighted in red. One of the big vocab terms that you should know is scarcity, and it states that limited resources don't match humanity's unlimited wants. And the only time something isn't scarce is when it's free and unlimited, meaning everything is scarce. The four factors of production are also vocab terms you should know. The four factors being land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Land is pretty self-explanatory. It's just the land being used to create a product. Labor is also pretty self-explanatory. It's just the labor, the workers that create the product. Capital is anything used by a business to produce a product, not including money, and it's usually machines, tools, or technology. Entrepreneurship is the person taking on all the financial risk when starting a business. Another set of terms are trade-off versus opportunity cost. A trade-off is all the alternative options someone has when making a decision, while the opportunity cost is just the next best option someone could have chosen. So if you want to think about it like this, an opportunity cost is just a more specific version of the trade-off. The trade-off is like the umbrella, and the opportunity cost is just the second choice that you would have made. So there are three economic systems that an economy could abide by. The less free one would be a command economy, and an example of this would be the USSR. In a command economy, there's less freedom, and government controls production and consumption of all goods. On the opposite end of a spectrum is a market economy. An example of a market economy is like the stereotypical American economy, where there's more freedom and private individuals and corporations will dictate production and consumption. The middle ground of this is a mixed economy, which uses both factors from a command and market economy, and most economies in the world fall under a mixed economy. So throughout the course, you're going to learn a bunch of different models that are going to show different aspects of the economy. This is going to be your first and probably most basic one, and it's the productions possibility curve. And the production possibilities curve shows all possible amounts of two products that an economy can produce. An economy can produce anything on the curve and inside the curve, and anything outside the curve an economy cannot produce. If an economy is producing inside the curve, then it's inefficient because it's not making complete use of all of its resources. If an economy is producing on the curve, it's completely efficient because it's making use of all resources available to it. And if it's outside the curve, it's unattainable because the economy doesn't have enough resources to reach that. And the only way to reach an unattainable point is to have either more land, labor, or capital. And a point on the curve would be known as a point of efficiency. Now, an opportunity cost can also either be increasing or constant. If the production possibilities curve is bowed out or curved like this, then the opportunity cost is increasing. But if it's linear, just like a line, then it's constant. Increasing the quality or quantity of resources available to an economy will move the curve outward, allowing you to create more of both goods, or one good, as shown on the right graph. One of the key things that you should associate with trade is opportunity cost. So whoever has the lower opportunity cost of a certain product should be the one creating the product. There are two vocab terms that you have to kind of associate with this, and that's absolute and comparative advantage. Absolute advantage just says who can create more of the product with the exact same resources, while comparative advantage just shows who has the lower opportunity cost of a given product. And comparative advantage should dictate who produces goods. If an economy has no trade, they're just limited to consuming what they produce. And the terms of trade is just a trade value agreed upon by the two economies that's in between the two opportunity costs. So there are usually two different types of trade problems that you'll come across in macro: input and output. Input problems have to deal with the resources needed to create a product, while output has to deal with the final product that's being created. If you're given an output problem, you do give up over get. which is the resources you're giving up versus the good or service that you're getting. While in an input problem, you have to do get over give up, which is obviously just the good or service that you're getting versus the resources that you're giving up. I'd say 90% of the time you're going to be dealing with an input problem, but it's still important to know how to do an output problem. Demand is a willingness or ability to buy a good or service. And the law of demand states that demand and price of a certain good are inversely related to each other. Meaning when price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down, and when price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. You can think about this from a consumer point of view, like if the price of a good increases, you're going to want to buy less of it. But if it's cheaper, then you're going to be able and willing to buy more of it. This is shown on the demand graph on the left. If there's a change in quantity demanded, it will move along the curve, while just a change in demand will shift the curve. And a change in demand is related to outside factors. And just a note, the demand graph is always sloping downward. 90% of the time, the question will ask you about a shift in the demand curve. TRIBE is an acronym that you can use to remember the outside factors that shift the demand curve. T for tastes and preferences. Let's say that scarves are super in for fashion, I guess. Then the demand for scarves will increase. R for related goods. There are two types of related goods, substitutes and complements. Substitute is a good that could replace a certain good. So let's say it's cookies and ice cream bars. If cookies and ice cream bars could be substitutes for each other as like a dessert, and demand for ice cream bars goes up, then less people are going to want to buy cookies because they wouldn't want to have two desserts. And a complement is a good that pairs nicely with another good. An example I like is peanut butter and jelly. If the price for peanut butter rises, then the demand for jelly will decrease because people usually buy peanut butter and jelly together. And if the price of peanut butter is higher, they're going to want to buy less peanut butter and jelly. I for income, it's pretty self-explanatory. If an economy's income is less, then they're going to be able to buy less goods. B for number of buyers. If the number of buyers in an economy increases, then the demand for a certain good will also increase. And E stands for expectations. These expectations usually have to do with prices. So if people expect the price of keyboards to increase in the future, either due to like a shift or some other factor, then the demand for keyboards are going to go down. And so any change in these factors will shift the demand curve, either right or left. So in summary, a change in price will cause a change in quantity demanded, and you'll move along the curve. While a change in tribe or outside factors will cause a change in the demand, which will shift the curve. Supply, willingness or ability to sell a good or service. Law of supply. Supply and price of a good are directly related, which means that when price increases, the quantity supplied increases, and when price decreases, the quantity supplied decreases. If you think about this from a seller's point of view, if you can sell a certain good for a higher price, you're going to want to sell and supply more of it, and vice versa for a lower price. The graph for supply is always sloping upward, which shows that direct relationship. A change in quantity supplied will move along the curve, while a change in supply will shift the curve either right or left. An acronym you can use to remember these shifts is SET-PIGS. S for number of suppliers. If the number of suppliers of a certain good increases, then the supply graph is going to shift right. E for expectations. If the suppliers expect the price of a certain good to go down, then the supply curve will shift left because they're going to want to sell less of that good because they can make less of a profit on it. T for technology. If there's more technology that allows people to make more of a certain good, like a new revolution in shirt making, they're going to be able to make more shirts. P for productivity. If the workers in a factory are more productive, they're going to be able to produce more, and so the supply curve is going to shift right. I for input costs. Input costs are the costs that suppliers need to create a product in the first place. Let's say if it's making a burger, then the input cost would be buying the bread, buying the lettuce, buying the meat, buying the oil to heat up the burger. All of that is put into the input costs. And so if the input cost of making that burger rises, then the supply curve is going to shift left because they're going to be able to create less of a profit on it. Like, let's say if hamburger meat rises in price, then it's going to be more expensive to create that burger. G for government influence. If government provides subsidies or tax breaks to certain companies, then that's going to shift the supply curve right because they will have more money to produce what they're producing. And S for shocks. These are just any outside factors that could influence the supply, like the war in Ukraine was a negative supply shock to the wheat industry, which would shift the supply curve left. So in summary, a change in price will cause a change in the quantity supplied, and you will move along the curve. And a change in set pigs will cause a change in S, a shift along the curve. Now we're going to look at the supply graph and the demand graph together. This is an example of a graph at equilibrium. So when the price and quantity are at the intersection between supply and demand, then you're at equilibrium. And there are two other versions of this graph that you have to know. One is a surplus, when the price of a good or service is too high, which results in high supply but low demand. Prices will naturally fall when you're in a surplus. And then you have a shortage. This is when the price of a good or service is too low, which results in high demand but low supply, and prices will naturally rise.